We start with some images from Singapore, pictures that until a few months ago seemed highly unlikely. This is a historic handshake that the international community has waited for years. US President Donald Trump and the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un met in Singapore on Tuesday. It is the first time a sitting US president has met with the North Korean leader. At the end of the landmark meeting, the two leaders signed a joint statement in which Kim committed to work towards the complete denuclearization of the Korean peninsula, while Trump committed to provide security guarantees to North Korea. However, the details of the content of the joint agreement are yet to be provided, and it is not clear how exactly the two leaders will execute the reached agreement. Trump said that Kim confirmed that North Korea was destroying a major engine testing site used for missiles, but added that international sanctions on Pyongyang would stay in place for now. Washington, on the other hand, will halt the joint military exercises with South Korea. Several political analysts say, without knowing the complexity of the deal, that this summit is just symbolic.
My meeting with Chairman Kim was honest, direct, and productive. We got to know each other well in a very confined period of time. We're prepared to start a new history, and we're ready to write a new chapter between our nations. We will be stopping the war games, which will save us a tremendous amount of money, unless and until we see that the future negotiation is not going along like it should.
Today we had a historic meeting and decided to leave the past behind, and we are about to sign a historic document. I would like to express my gratitude to President Trump for making this meeting happen.
The agreement also didn't mention whether the two sides would finally sign a peace treaty or not. North Korea and the United States were on opposite sides in the 1950-1953 Korean War, which ended with a truce. Technically, this makes North and South Korea still at war, but the people on both sides of the Korea Peninsula say this summit is a step towards peace.
I was so moved, even wondering if it was photoshopped. It was like a dream to see the two leaders of North Korea and the U.S. meet and talk face to face during my lifetime. The unification we dream of is not a unification by those in power. It is a unification where we in the South and North Korean youth of our future generations can find security, happiness, and freedom, and laugh, dream, and love.
Now let's move to Nicaragua, where 2 policemen died and 3 others were kidnapped on Monday during an attack to a police station in the municipality of Mulucucú. A Facebook video filmed in the city showed 2 police officers in delicate conditions after being shot. On Monday, a cleanup plan was undertaken in Managua, Boaco, Cebaco, León, and other regions of the country. Police, along with citizens, removed obstacles from the streets. Clashes took place in various other cities. Former President of Panama, Ricardo Martinelli, was extradited from the United States on Monday to face justice, has asked the court to be transferred to a hospital. Martinelli claimed he had health problems, but the court denied his request, so the former president will stay at the prison complex El Renacer in the capital city. Martinelli is accused of ordering the surveillance of over 150 people, including journalists and politicians. Panama has also submitted an extradition request for Martinelli's sons, Ricardo and Luis Enrique, accused of taking $56 million in bribes from the Brazilian construction giant Odebrecht to facilitate contracts.
Family members and journalists awaited Martinelli at Panama Pacific Airport. He was supposed to arrive at 8:30 in the morning. Instead, he arrived at the airport in Tocumen.
We have been fooled. Apparently, he was supposed to land in Tocumen.
But we have all been fooled. One of the cases against him is the violation of more than 145 victims. Another case is the purchase of telephone equipment that disappeared, also embezzlement and the monitoring of opposition leaders. That makes 4 cases where he is being investigated. While some celebrate that the former president will now face justice, others question why the deaths and injuries as part of protests against his government are not part of the cases against him.
Like the case of the massacre in Changuinola, those killed in San Feliz as well as Colón, various attacks that are not part of the trial against Martinelli.
After a medical checkup, the former president was transferred to El Renacer jail center where he will await his trial. Now, the Panamanian justice system will be the one who decides his future.
In Guatemala, residents from El Rodeo community had to be urgently evacuated on Monday following new mudslides. The mud flow took the same route as the lava that killed at least 114 people and left about 200 missing in the eruption on June 3rd. Meanwhile, the search for the bodies of the victims continues in the area now known as Ground Zero. It has been blessed by a priest as one of the last pieces of hope remaining for relatives after losing their loved ones.
In the name of the Catholic Church, in the name of His Grace, Victor Hugo, who is the bishop of this diocese, we have been given the opportunity to come bless this place in an act of charity. With sadness in our hearts, this is really a common grave.
Meanwhile, more than a week after the eruption, survivors are still awaiting for a concrete response from the government. Let's hear from our correspondent Mario Rosales with the latest from Guatemala City.
The emergency continues after the eruption of the Fuego volcano. It's been 1 week since the disaster, and the government does not have concrete data on how many people died or have disappeared. They maintain a pretty conservative and minuscule figure. According to people and social and civic organizations working in the Escuintla region, it's a very difficult situation for the victims because the government is not providing accurate data on the number of disappeared individuals, victims, and especially how they will come up with an emergency plan for the victims under housing. The situation in the shelters is causing concern after a man was arrested after trying to sexually assault an 11-year-old girl. That happened in one of the shelters in Escuintla. Organizations will be demonstrating outside Congress in Guatemala's capital to demand the immediate and effective help for the victims of the eruption.
That was Mario Rosales from Guatemala. We'll take a short break now, but join us again after this video from our multimedia team. Welcome back. Ecuador's Attorney General is trying to connect former President Rafael Correa to an alleged kidnapping case that took place in Bogotá, Colombia in August 2012, sparking debate on the use of justice for political persecution.
The Attorney General of the state, Raúl Pérez Reina, has requested that the National Court of Justice include former President Rafael Correa in the case of former politician Fernando Valda. The Attorney General announced that the new information has come to light that incriminates Correa in the alleged abduction.
It is insane. It just reveals how the rule of law is broken in Ecuador.
The Attorney General's office has requested 72 hours to develop the case within the frameworks of the Constitution. In a statement, the National Assembly confirmed that they are revising the request.
The response from the Assembly members must support the continuation of the trial.
Fernando Valda was a politician accused of illegal activity and sentenced for spying, among others violations. Former President Rafael Correa has expressed his anger and innocence via his Twitter account, criticizing the allegations leveled against him. Denise Herrera, Del Sur, Quito, Ecuador.
Prime Minister of Barbados, Mia Mottley, has presented her government's first budget, and it stands firm on a number of her campaign promises to improve services. Mottley spent over 2 hours delivering her speech on the budget to the Parliament. Last week, the International Monetary Fund urged Barbados to cut public spending, including pensions, in order to address its high debt and deficit. Mottley promised to return the country's finances to a surplus by March next year, but she says she will do this while protecting social spending.
So, sir, our nation stands on the brink of its biggest battle that we've had to face in our 52 years. And as I said, if we shy away from this battle now, our debt, sir, will devour us. Today, servicing our debt consumes more money than the entire central government wage bill. I want to repeat myself. Servicing Barbados's debt, our interest bill, consumes more than the entire central government wage bill.
So let's take a look at some of these promises that Prime Minister Mottley says she plans to keep according to the budget. Students at the University of the West Indies will pay no tuition fees starting this September. Retirees' pensions will increase from $78 to $113. Corporation tax will rise from 25 to 30%. Income tax on earnings over $38,000 will go up 40%. And all public sector workers will get a wage increase of 5% from April this year until March 2019. Rejection is mounting in Argentina against the agreement that the government of Mauricio Macri signed with the IMF, and truck drivers have called for a general strike.
Turning to the International Monetary Fund means deepening the neoliberal policies of the Cambiemos government. The conditions attached to the agreement sharpen those policies of adjustment even further. Utility prices will continue to rise. Layoffs in the public sector will also increase, and workers' real wages will fall.
The Monetary Fund proposes a kind of double austerity in terms of infrastructure, which directly hits the construction companies, which have been a major pillar of support for Macri. And on the other hand, they demand a cut in spending that will make people poor and slash their purchasing power, to an extent that the Argentinian people are not willing to accept.
In the middle of Argentina's economic crisis, the credit line of $50 billion begins with a tranche of $15 billion, subject to compliance with the program demanded by the fund. From now on, the economic adjustment will be under the control of experts from the International Monetary Fund.
This is the return of the International Monetary Fund that led Argentina into a terminal crisis in 2001. This is a movie we have already seen, and now, step by step, we are seeing exactly the same sequence of events as in the 1990s. The International Monetary Fund demands cuts in public spending, and for the government, that means cuts in health and education.
The powerful Truckers Union has confirmed that if they don't get an increase of 27%, they will begin a complete stoppage from Thursday, alongside the CTA Union Federation. And they are urging the Federal Confederation of Labor, the CGT, to join them and make it a general strike.
We have a meeting today and the bosses said that they cannot pay 27%. We will go to a hearing tomorrow, but we have already ratified Thursday's strike.
In exchange for the International Monetary Fund support, Argentina must take severe adjustments of more than $19 billion that will include budget cuts to pensions, public works, and subsidies. As discontent grows, the unions expect the protests to increase even more in the coming days.
In Uruguay, farmers, traders, and transporters are protesting tax hikes and what they believe is an atmosphere of rising insecurity in the country. They temporarily blocked their cars and lorries on a highway 64 kilometers from the capital city, Montevideo. Demonstrations also took place in other 34 spots across the country in this two-day protest. Protesters brought together by the movement Un Solo Uruguay, which is Spanish for a single Uruguay, are urging Tabaré Vázquez's government to take concrete measures against the increase of gas prices. The movement wants to push the cabinet to reduce the oil prices up to 30%.
We're taking part in a protest organized by the movement Un Solo Uruguay. We are here to denounce our feeling of uncertainty and insecurity. We are here with the hope that politicians will become aware that we are no longer making any profits in the manufacturing sector.
We used to live peacefully. We would sleep with our doors open. Today, that is impossible. You have to barricade yourself indoors, live behind bars, and we aren't used to this.
To Brazil now, where electricity workers have begun a three-day strike against the privatization of Eletrobras, the state energy company. Eletrobras is Latin America's biggest power utility company and operates the huge hydroelectric plant at Itaipu. Last year, President Michel Temer proposed selling it off.
Here in Brazil, a 72-hour strike is underway, organized by unions and confederations of the electricity sector. This strike is against the privatization of Eletrobras, one of the major projects of the governments of Michel Temer. The objective is to sell the company to help cover the public deficit. This privatization is subject to some of the legislation going through Congress, and which workers have been protesting against. Workers say that if the company is privatized, energy bills will rise, and many people will be affected. This strike will last until Wednesday, and the workers say that the essential services will be maintained. The unions also want the removal of the president of the company, Wilson Ferreira Jr. Those are the main demands of this strike, which comes at a time when the government of Michel Temer is facing a record low on its popularity. According to a recent poll by Datafolia, only 3% approve of his administration, and most Brazilians do not agree with this drive towards privatization that his government is promoting. That is why the electricity workers are being supported in the strike by other organizations and movements, like the Landless Movement and the Movement of the Victim of Dams. They are all against this privatization of Eletrobras that is being promoted by Temer's government.
That was Adriana Robreño from Brasilia. In Grenada, the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States says they're worried about the lack of skilled labor in the region. The news comes from an investigation that showed Grenada's construction sector needed to import labor because there was a lack of people with skills to complete finishing touches of multi-million-dollar hotel projects.
People believe that whatever even when you are certified, that's a label you can wear on your sleeve for life. And it's not so, because knowledge is changing very quickly. As I said, technology is also accelerating the pace of change of knowledge. And so regardless of what sector you are in, you have an obligation to yourself to keep your knowledge current, to keep your skills up to date by doing continuous refresher programs and so on.
The Organization of Eastern Caribbean States will meet in St. Lucia for the 65th meeting of the OECS Authority next Monday and Tuesday. It is expected that all 10 heads of government will be in attendance to discuss matters related to climate change, trade, border security, external representation, applications for membership, and other areas of regional priority.
And therefore,
Jamaica's Prime Minister Andrew Holness has been invited to speak at the G20 summit in Argentina and at a special ocean summit in Oslo, Norway. Over the weekend, Holness spoke at the G7 summit in Canada about the dangers of climate change for small island nations. At the G7, Holness held bilateral talks with the President of Argentina, Mauricio Macri, looking at ways of strengthening cooperation in agriculture. Holness was specially invited by President Macri and Prime Minister of Norway, Erna Solberg, to speak at their summits. We'll take one last short break, but join us again after this video from our multimedia team. Thanks for joining us again. 500 migrants aboard the stranded rescue ship Aquarius will be transferred to 2 Italian ships before sailing to the coast of Spain. Spain Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez agreed to take in the stranded rescue ship after Italy and Malta refused its entry. The Aquarius was carrying over 600 migrants, including pregnant women and children. 129 migrants will remain on the Aquarius, and all 3 ships will dock in Valencia. Now let's take a look at some other stories making headlines around the world.
Hundreds of people took to the streets of Rome to protest against the Italian Interior Minister Matteo Salvini's decision to close the port of Sicily to the migrant ship carrying over 600 people. Protesters and police clashed as tensions ran high in the capital. Peace activists staged a die-in outside the entrance to the Eurosatory Arms exhibition in Paris yesterday to make a stand against an Israeli defense company and the international arms trade. Activists laid motionless in splattered blood on the stairs leading to one of the exhibition centers before being removed by the police. The protest was organized by the Boycott, Divestment and Sanctions movement.
Israel calls any opponent to its regime anti-Semitic. I am a Jew. And I suffered because I am a Polish Jew. I have a small family because many have died in Lodz ghetto, and I cannot be considered an anti-Semite. This is a way of denouncing also that we must not play the role of the victims. The only goal is the occupation and the hoardings of the resources by making an entire population suffer in apartheid and in expulsion.
4 gunmen have been killed by a gunman in Orlando after a 21-hour standoff with local police. The commotion started when police responded to a domestic violence call by the gunman's girlfriend. The officer was shot in the face by the suspect, who then barricaded himself into his girlfriend's apartment, taking 4 children as hostages before taking his own life. The officer is still in critical condition.
In Syria, Muslim believers gathered at the Umayyad Mosque in the capital city Damascus for the evening prayers marking the Laylat al-Qadr, All Night of Destiny. This is one of the most important celebrations during the holy fasting month of Ramadan. According to the Islamic faith, the Laylat al-Qadr marks the night where the first verses of the Quran were revealed to the Prophet Muhammad through Archangel Gabriel. Muslims believe that on this night, their destiny for the next year is decided, and therefore they pray to God throughout the night, invoking His mercy and salvation. And with that, we come to the end of this news brief. But this and other stories you can find on our website, as you know, telesurtv.net/English. And be sure to also follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Carla Gonzalez. Thank you for watching.